Good evening, Fort Collins, and welcome, and welcome to the Fort Collins State of the City address. Thanks for joining us for this remote State of the City address tonight. I'm Mayor Wade Troxell. Joining me this evening is our City Manager, Darin Atteberry. Hi, Darin. As we look back on this past year, and as you might say, our hindsight is now 2020. It has been an unprecedented year with the last 10 months impacting everyone in our community in multiple ways. We've been wearing masks and washing our hands more and being physically distanced to keep NOCO open. Thank you, Fort Collins. You've made a difference to reduce the spread of the coronavirus and the infection to one another. We have now passed over 200 deaths in Lamar County. And and to those that might have lost a loved one, a friend, a colleague, our heartfelt sympathy goes out to you tonight. We are here to discuss the state of the city tonight over this past year. Thank you all that have joined us this evening. And you might even be possibly enjoying a nosh delivery meal from one of our restaurants. I want to turn our attention and recognize our city council members joining us here tonight. Our Mayor Pro Tem and District 5 Council Member, Ross Kniff. Our District 1 Representative, Susan Gutkowski. Our District 2 Council Member, Julie Pignataro. Our District 3 Council Member, Ken Summers. Our new District 4 Council Member, Melanie Pagnani. And our District 6 Council Member, Emily Gorgol. Thank you to our various elected officials that are joining us from various sites tonight, including those representing our local districts, our county commissioners, our state representatives, our federal and government partners. And our council wants to specifically thank our new county commissioner, Kristen Stevens, for her service on our city council for almost 6 years. And now reflecting upon this past year, it doesn't seem that long ago when we were together last year for the State of the City address at the Hall of Champions at Canvas Stadium, sharing our stories in one-on-one conversations. Darin and I are looking forward to continuing our personal journeys with our conversations with you tonight.
Well, thank you, Mayor. I also want to say hello and thank you to all of our community members who are joining us this evening. Welcome to the City Council, our city colleagues, and also our city's executive leadership team. I'm truly grateful to be working on these important matters with you and working directly with you. So tonight's format is very different than past State of the City events. The mayor mentioned our last one was on Colorado State University campus, but due to COVID-19 safety guidelines, we're doing this remote. And I'm just going to say up front, this is not the easiest thing for the mayor and I to do. We're both relationship people. We know the relationship matters a lot with our community. In past years, having an event where several hundred people come and celebrate their city and hear stories. We talk about difficult matters, but we also talk about the great things going on in the community the past year. And we don't get those before our State of the City event greetings, and we certainly don't get to hang out and talk about how much we all love the city. So we're going to miss seeing you this evening, and so bear with us as we get through this talking to a screen and not having anybody have a chance to react and share your feedback. So take a deep breath and we'll get this started. I do want to acknowledge what a year it's been. Seriously, what a big year 2020 was. It came with a lot of sadness for people. There's people who are very angry, people who are disappointed, people who have horrible stories. We also have people in our community that there's really been no impact. It's been sort of life as usual, but not for everyone. In my own family, we lost out on graduation ceremonies. We had COVID-friendly weddings. We had a family member's, my mother-in-law's home burnt down in Northern California as part of the fires. It's been kind of a pretty miserable year for a lot of folks. I hope that tonight You hear the optimism that we have at the city, though, as well, through the mayor and through my words. And that's not a Pollyannish, naive optimism. That's an informed optimism. So we want to acknowledge that up front. You know, we've been looking forward to sharing some of our thoughts and stories and updates in this past calendar year, and we're excited about that. So tonight, we're going to have 3 brief videos that speak to some very serious major events that shaped 2020. COVID-19, racial and social justice, and 2 very large fires right in our backyard. So the first of those videos is focused around COVID-19 pandemic and the corresponding economic crisis. Let's take a look and see how we responded.
You know, when I look back to March in our first case, we realized this was going to be a really big deal. Nothing in our emergency plans was quite ready for the volume of resources requests at the same time throughout our entire country. Luckily, we worked together on logistics and resource requests, and that paid off early on in the pandemic.
We had to ramp up really fast to figure out these challenges that we weren't prepared for. I remember when it was really starting to click in. January, we were watching. February, we were watching. And actually, things were really starting to pop. And everybody was talking about, oh, this is going to take up some time from us this year. But even in the emergency management world, there really wasn't quite that clarity of what does this mean. We hadn't had a significant pandemic in 100 years.
When we look back in April, we were just answering any questions that came about and really translating what was happening at the state level. And it was changing almost hourly, which was really hard to keep up with, and to know what was happening in each of the industries was really tough.
We all had to kind of like cling to each other and do this together fast. So the downside is 2020 has thrown us so many challenges. The upside is very quickly we realized there's energy that comes from doing things in challenging times together.
We rally as a community, don't we? Larimer County has done a fantastic job throughout the pandemic.
I'm proud of the fact that our city council and our community decided to dedicate 70% of their CARES dollars specifically for our community. They really wanted to get that money into the hands of the people who needed it. To be able for them to have tools that they could pull down and utilize was a really important component for us.
Every day I would go to work, and one of the city person was like, okay, we'll talk in the city, we'll figure out like how guys would push the utility bill for a while and so on. So anyways, there's so many needs, and then everyone was trying to help, and then I was so grateful.
We definitely utilized the city and county websites to kind of determine how we were essential and how we were able to do business to make things work.
The best thing that was done was the ease of getting information in a time that where there's constant change and information is constantly changing. It definitely was helpful to small businesses.
The one thing I would hope we don't forget is that we banded together even in this remote world.
I just saw our behaviors change. I didn't want to wear a face covering. I don't want to stay home, but we all did that. We made those sacrifices to save lives.
It tests you as an individual, it tests you as an organization, but it also defined you as an individual and defined you as an organization, and that's what we saw.
You know, upon personally reflecting back on the early days of COVID back in March, things were changing rapidly. Coming back from the National League of Cities on a flight back to Denver, there were a couple COVID positive individuals on that flight and that we were exposed to, and we had to self-quarantine for 14 days upon arrival. And that self-quarantine ended a day before Governor Polis did a stay-at-home order. I remember being in Dulles Airport and it was nearly empty. I remember some of our early council actions to support the health of our community. There were some emergency ordinances, and the wearing of masks in places of business were put into place and were voted on by our council. We had to lean on the expertise in partnerships in our community with our public health partners to respond, and also to work in collaboration with partners throughout our community, our businesses, Colorado State University, Poudre School District, Larimer County, other agencies. And I'd just like to take this time to thank all of them for working with us during that very trying time in early March. I joined with other mayors across the country for Bloomberg COVID response virtual calls that included weekly updates from Johns Hopkins University experts on the latest understanding and best practices around COVID as a virus. What were the best practice responses, and then planning for the vaccines. In these virtual meetings with mayors from all over the United States and the world, I am forever reminded how thankful I am to be representing Fort Collins. Our call to action and working together, and I will take our challenge every day to work with Fort Collins to meet the challenge. I was on virtual calls with our county health director regularly, our governor, our U.S. House representative, and our U.S. senators on regular basis. We need to recognize at this time, Colorado State University, along with Johns Hopkins University, these are two universities that are in the top 4 in the world that are providing effective and meaningful responses to COVID-19 that we first recognized in Larimer County in March. Just some of the examples of the adaptation and innovation that marked this moment of time in our community. Here are some examples. The city's wastewater utility partnered with Colorado State University to monitor and provide early detection of COVID and COVID load within our community through the wastewater effluent. And that's a key marker to help in reducing the impact of the disease. Also, our businesses like Old Elk Distillery pivoted to provide sanitizer to all of our city utility workers and other city frontline workers to help protect them. We found ways to rally our community during the stay-at-home phase. And one of the times I remember vividly was the Blue Angels fly by in mid-April, recognizing our frontline workers.
I remember the Blue Angel event specifically, looking out my backyard, and what an impressive display, and just, getting goosebumps by how just the gratitude that I had at that moment, and made me think about the entire response, and that all of us are dealing with this, not just Fort Collins, but so many others. And Mayor, I want to express my gratitude for several of our partners as well. You mentioned Larimer County. Many departments at Larimer County really stepped up, including Public Health Department, their board of directors and their staff, and certainly Tom Gonzalez. His name needs to be mentioned and recognized. Tom, we thank you for your resiliency, your accessibility, and your professionalism. You have really stepped up. Not everyone agrees with every decision that you've made, but I think you've done it, and you've modeled civility and professionalism. We're grateful for that. From day one, we said that we would rely on public health experts at the federal, state, and local level, and that we would support and actively engage in a regional approach. I think we honored that commitment, and we were continuing to do that work. But we work to develop programs such as Keep NOCO Open campaign and many others. This wasn't just alone about the city of Fort Collins. There were many others in Northern Colorado and throughout the state that we partnered with. I also want to say thank you to President Joyce McConnell at CSU and her colleagues. Fort Collins is a city of 175,000 people. 32,000 of those are students. And CSU employs about 6,000 faculty and staff, and we truly are a university city. And just as the mayor said, the work that the university has done in terms of becoming a best practice university in this space, I think has really helped all of us as community members, as a local government. She's been an amazing partner to work with, and her staff. You know, also I think about our healthcare providers, UC Health and Banner, led by Kevin Unger and Margot Karsten. We appreciated their expertise, their accessibility, and just their service to Fort Collins. And they were playing at much bigger tables, but they would always be available as we needed information, real-time information about hospital bed capacity and ventilators and so forth. And that was very important. You know, another goal that we discussed early on was that we wanted to model strong and effective leadership as one of the top 5 largest employers in Fort Collins. You know, we come out of this pandemic with some questions that we ask ourselves. We're not out of it yet, but the questions that we need to ask is, did we exceed the expectations of our community as it related to information and did we over communicate? Did we deliver reliable services? Did we get stronger as an employer and in our relationships with our city colleagues? You know, we've been very intentional about that. And we don't know the answer to all those questions, but we certainly have committed to the goals of you know, great customer service, great services, and a great place to work at the city of Fort Collins. All of this required us talking with others in the community, including a few CEOs of businesses in town that I want to mention. Jim Park from Otterbox and Blue Ocean and Old Elk, and Tom Gendron from Woodward, both chief executive officers of these companies. They were valuable resources. And there were others involved as well. But and I want to just thank the many you know, chief executive officers, plant managers, small business owners, and others. When we stayed curious in this journey, we shared a lot of things like remote work philosophies and various workforce matters and personnel matters with this changing, very, very dynamic situation, and even philosophies around the use of emergency funds and reserves. I remember one person saying to me, well, it was Tom Gendron, look, we build rainy day funds for rainy days. This was a hurricane. Let's not only look to those reserves, but figure out a plan to replenish those reserves when after we've used them. Navigating these relationships gracefully and also during a pandemic requires a lot of collaboration. Well, let me say also, in addition to the immediate health and safety issues of COVID, for the city organization and for residents of our community, it doesn't need to be said, there's been a profound impact on our local businesses. To help address restaurant impacts early on, we quickly found ways to enable expanded outdoor dining and curbside pickup. We've received a lot of positive feedback from our restaurant owners and business owners, as well as residents of Fort Collins who really wanted to get out and support local businesses and get some fresh air and get outside. We created specific resources for local businesses to understand the various and sometimes conflicting health orders. Look, you know, it's hard enough for local government to interact with county and state and federal government, and we're sort of experts at that. But some of our local businesses, they're not. They're experts at cooking great meals and delivering goods and providing services. And so the work that our folks provided in helping interpret some of those things was valuable early on and continues to be. And I received feedback from many of our businesses about that. So through our economic health office, which it's important to lift up that group at this point, Josh Burks, the leader of that group, and Shannon and Ken and Sana and others, the whole team has done a remarkable job during this time. They provided encouragement, support, and access to the much needed information and resources, including financial support. And as all of this was going on, it was critical for us to adapt to continue our 24/7 services. You know, it takes more than a few easy decisions to enable remote work for our colleagues, including modifying customer-facing services and implementing new cleaning safety measures. Sounds easy, right? Not so easy. A lot of people working on that and a lot of people learning as they were going. I remember, as one person said, you know, early in these discussions, that we were sort of building the airplane that we were intending to fly as we were flying it. You know, we made some very significant shifts in how we do recreation and cultural services at the city during this time. There were some remarkable adaptations from online fitness classes, Camp Fun Quest, Mind Matters, Garden of Lights, and even COVID-safe weddings at the Lincoln Center. Also, remember 4th of July, how long ago that seems? You know, I'm really proud of the way in which creativity sort of prevailed and the way that our Parks Department and our Communications Office and others occurred, and really enabling people to stay active and engaged in a really important holiday over this past year. I think about the north side at Aslan Center. By design, it became an active shelter through collaboration with Homeward 2020 and the various service providers in our community. There's much more work to be done on non-congregate housing and driving the outcome of making homelessness in our community and throughout Colorado rare, short-lived, and non-recurring. And as CARES Act funding became available in the early summer, many creative measures were implemented to give support. In particular, funds were dedicated to residents for such needs as housing and food security, childcare services, and assistance with utility bills for those who were unable to pay. If you were watching closely, you know the mayor and the city council were driving that process. We talked a lot and extensively for many hours and many meetings about the need to help our residents get housing and be secure from a food standpoint and child care services. So this was not something that we copied and pasted from lots of other places. This is something that our council and our city staff helped drive and engage with you as we developed those things. So on the business front, 3 rounds of business assistant checks were distributed and new partnerships with entities such as Nosh Delivery were built. That's a group that we're recognizing this evening, and I hope many of you utilize their services this evening for free. And in talking with Josh Burks, it sounds like another round of checks will go out, I think either later this week or early next week. So, and there's been a lot done in terms of online web resources that folks can find on our city website. So that's it, Mayor. I'll turn it over to you.
Well, thanks. And the council's been doing a lot to maintain and provide continuance of our local governance and the modification of our council meetings. We had to move from in-person meetings to remote meetings to a hybrid format of meetings. And now we're back to remote meetings as we are in level orange. And some of these changes have presented new ways for our community to connect with their local government. And many of these may continue after the pandemic's over. The Zoom platform has allowed more people to speak with council and made it easier to do live interpretation for non-English speaking community members. You know, looking ahead, and there's hope of vaccines now on the horizon in our community with the possibility for additional funding, as I was on a call today with Representative Neguse. Our first CARES Act funding saw $16.9 million for the Northern Colorado Regional Airport for important improvements, including a new terminal to go with the remote tower. And so that's clearly a key asset within Northern Colorado and Fort Collins. Our city foundation, CityGive, established philanthropic partnerships in response to COVID, creating opportunities for long-term gifts to benefit our community into the future.
So as many are aware, we've seen disproportionate impacts to communities of color throughout this pandemic. We believe that this has amplified disparities and further highlighted issues of systemic racism and calls for social justice, another major theme in our nation and community in 2020. So here's another video that shares what that's looked like throughout our community, throughout our country, and in our own community.
My name is D'Angelo Bowden, and I work for the City of Fort Collins Social Sustainability Department. I wanted to take a few moments to recognize that 2020 brought its challenges, and we faced them as a nation and as a community. And while we all did have our own individual struggles, we also came together and we supported each other through those very difficult times. A series of new murders committed against the Black community showed the world the painful price of white supremacy. The effects of COVID-19 made these disparities painfully obvious. The country seemed to pay attention in ways we've not seen in decades. The outpouring of demand for racial justice rivaled the civil rights movements of the 1960s. Last summer, the murders of George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, and many others sparked outrage and prompted hundreds of marches, demonstrations, and protests across the nation. Black Lives Matter, a movement that had a 40% approval rating from Americans just 2 years ago, skyrocketed to a 90% approval rating. And unlike the civil rights movements of the 1960s, reached into every corner of the United States, in both cities and rural towns, as well as across the globe. In Fort Collins, the response was no different. Peaceful protests took place in Old Town and at the Police Services Building and on CSU's campus. The city's police chief, Jeff Sloboda, supported the peaceful protesters by confirming that he understood why people were marching and that police brutality exists in America and needs to be addressed. Going a step further, City Council formed a special committee in the aftermath of widespread protests. The goal of the Ad Hoc Community Impact Committee is to help ensure the city is creating an environment that provides safety and equity for all Fort Collins residents. The committee includes council members Emily Gorbel, Julie Pignataro, and Susan Gutowski. On June 4th, Mayor Wade Troxell issued a special proclamation in response to the murder of George Floyd, reaffirming the city's commitment to equity, inclusion, and justice, and asking our community to work together to improve racial justice in Fort Collins. Civic leaders also stepped up its advocacy for enhancing equality in our community. Leading with metrics on race, the CUNY Institute for State and Local Governance was selected to head the Equity Indicators Project and establish a framework for measuring and understanding equality gaps in Fort Collins. Equity indicators are just one tool local governments use to measure and track the experiences of equality among community members. After data has been collected and indicators have been chosen, the city will create a website to enhance accountability and transparency for its efforts. This site will be available early this year, and our hope is external partners and community members will engage with this tool. The ultimate goal is to address outdated systems that perpetuate racism and oppression. Recently, city staff members created Encore, an employee resource group for staff of color. Encore is providing connections and support for employees of color that need it, while facilitating powerful conversations internally. The group hopes to positively impact recruitment, retention, and leadership for employees of color. Internally, the City of Fort Collins has been talking about the creation of an equity office. And in those conversations, we are hoping to address some of the challenges that our BIPOC community or our Black, Indigenous, and people of color face every single day. That was especially highlighted in 2020. I know that I personally want to thank my colleagues here at the City of Fort Collins for supporting me in this space and continuing to support our community to the best of their ability. And I also want to just thank the community members that participated with us in that challenging year. So thank you all for taking the time to watch this with us and to go through this journey with us. We really do appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you, D'Angelo. Equity and inclusion has and will remain a city council priority. The goal is for Fort Collins to be a welcoming city for all, for everyone to have the support needed and to have a happy and healthy life here. The City Council's Community Impact Ad Hoc Committee formed an aim to ensure that the city is creating an environment that provides safety and equity for all of our residents.
There are additional ways that we're supporting City Council's priority around equity and inclusion. A couple of these are maybe a reiteration of what D'Angelo just shared, but I think they're worthy of an exclamation point. So first, a racial equity rapid response team has been established and has created what we refer to as a just-in-time tool. Second, as D'Angelo mentioned, our collective work on the Equity Indicators Project will be a great way to operationalize this priority through establishing baseline understanding of disparities, and we'll prioritize our work for the future. Third, we've built what we call vulnerable and susceptible populations team to address the needs and connect our most at-risk residents to resources. And I'm excited to share that with the strong support of our mayor and city council, we are beginning the recruitment of a new city executive position, Chief Equity and Inclusion Officer, and creating this office with direct report to my office. This will not be embedded out in the organization somewhere. It'll be directly reporting to the city manager's office. This will give the highest level voice of authority to this important topic throughout our organization and externally in the community. It's our goal to begin the recruitment of this process, or the recruitment process position, this month. So finally, another really important element to building a community that is serious about its role in being equitable and accessible is its readiness for digital access to all of its residents, and especially children. What if it doesn't matter where you live, your income level, or your age or ethnicity when you're thinking about a connected city? So watch our digital access and equity program through Connection Broadband this coming year. Fort Collins, I truly believe we will be differentiating ourselves from nearly every other small, medium, large city in North America.
Thank you, Darin. And this extends beyond just the pandemic into all city programs, making government and our services provided and to be accessible by all. We added a housing manager position to address housing attainment and affordability with the Council Housing Ad Hoc Committee, leading to the development of a long-needed housing strategic plan in our community. When developing our 2021 budget, we saw participation from all portions of our community, and in a process that saw diverse interests and engagement like I've never seen in my 14 years. Monies were redeployed to help outreach Fort Collins in conjunction with our police services to help to provide a safe community for all.
The 2021 budget process, which we completed last year, obviously, was a significant challenge given the dynamic nature of what's happening at the global level and then also what's happening in our local economy. Again, this is an item that the city council, one of the primary responsibilities that city councils have is to appropriate the dollars in which the city staff then aligns with their vision and then executes, and hopefully executes with high effectiveness. With the council's support, we modified our strategic budgeting process from a 2-year strategic cycle, and we moved to what I would call a 1-year tactical approach. So the approach continued to reflect the city council and community priorities. It's resulted in several very significant belt tightening measures that we incurred sort of internal to the organization. But the entire theme for the mayor and council, myself and the city's executive team, was to try and minimize those outward facing services. And while at the same time moving forward on some pretty important capital projects, for example, the I-25 improvements. It's hard to not notice the significant impacts and the project that's happening out in I-25. Our commitment to I-25 remains steady. The long-awaited Vine and LeMay overpass. This is, as far as I know, as far as I recall, we've been talking about this as a priority for probably 20 years from now. And if you live up in that area and you experience the kind of traffic and delays and safety concerns that our residents do up in the northeast side of town. You're probably doing like cartwheels and high fives right now, because that project will be under construction this spring, and those monies were appropriated by our city council in this budget. Many other budgetary items and sort of successes are going to occur, but one that I think is really important is also continuing our critical partnerships with organizations such as the Poudre Fire Authority. So let me transition and say we really can't talk about 2020 without acknowledging the profound impact of the largest wildfire in the history of Colorado that occurred in our backyard. Actually, two very significant fires. So the next video that we're going to go to now really is a highlight of both the Cameron Peak Fire and the East Troublesome Fire. And I hope in this you see the collaboration and the professionalism that occurs with our various partners and our own Poudre Fire Authority.
Hi, I'm Tom DeMint, Fire Chief for the Poudre Fire Authority. 2020 will always be remembered as a year of the COVID-19 pandemic. In addition to the struggles and the strife of the pandemic, our community experienced the largest wildfire in Colorado's history. 208,000 acres of our forest nearby burned. Let's take a look back at the responders from our local community and from throughout the nation and how they handled this tragic event. What became the largest wildfire in Colorado history involved more than 2,000 personnel at its peak. Career and volunteer wildland firefighters, forestry experts, pilots, communication specialists, and meteorologists all were assets of the highest level of an incident management team possible. They came from 46 states, even Puerto Rico. The fire was first reported on August 13th near Cameron Pass. It included multiple periods of extreme fire behavior and rapid spread rates, one that expanded more than 78,000 acres or 120 square miles in just 3 days. Many ask, what made this fire different? Weather conditions for one, extreme temperatures, low humidity, and winds which reached over 70 miles per hour, combined with rugged terrain and vast stands of drought-stricken and beetle-killed trees, led to the fire's massive growth. As the fire progressed south and east, a few of the many threatened areas included CSU's mountain campus, the Red Feather Lakes area, and portions of Rocky Mountain National Park. In Larimer County, residents faced voluntary and mandatory evacuations, leaving many to wonder what they would see when they would return. The Red Cross and local nonprofits worked together to shelter hundreds of displaced residents, in many cases, their pets and livestock. On October 14th, after 62 days of burning, the Cameron Peak Fire became the largest recorded wildfire in Colorado's history. With hurricane-force winds, it reached the Front Range, causing damage throughout the mountainous regions of Larimer County and now had entered the Masonville area. The fire created a different kind of alarm as it entered the PFA jurisdiction for the first time. Distant flames were now visible from the streets of Fort Collins. Community members, many of you, felt a more acute concern or even fear. Although PFA had been involved since day one, this dispatched a much higher level of our resources. A spot fire, which became known as the Otter Road Fire, triggered additional evacuations for hundreds of additional people. Firefighters spent day and night building fire lines, protecting structures, physically standing guard. PFA volunteers, many of whose own homes were at risk, dedicated themselves to the protection of the area. They went door to door and helped with evacuation communications. The city also saw one of its beloved natural areas affected, Bobcat Ridge, where 75% of the mixed forest and grassland property burned, leaving behind a changed ecosystem. By late October, the Cameron Peak Fire had burned over 300 square miles, a land area more than 5 times the size of Fort Collins. And just when we thought we'd seen it all, Grand County's East Troublesome Fire, also exploded in size and intensity, jumping the Continental Divide into Larimer County and forcing thousands of additional evacuations for our Estes Park neighbors. Both locally and regionally, the Cameron Peak Fire was destructive. 469 structures were impacted, the majority of those destroyed. Sadly, 42 were primary residences. And still, although not fully evaluated, tens of thousands of acres were burned, which will impact our local watershed for years to come. One remarkable story of cooperation was the urgent need to house crews for this latest run of the fire. Within hours of the U.S. Forest Service request, the old Hughes Stadium site was transformed into a makeshift camp for 500 firefighters and their support. Thank you to the city's utilities and parks department who rose to the challenge of mowing 20 acres of grass and deploying enough electric and water hookups virtually overnight. PFA and the people of the Front Range are familiar with wildfire. We train year-round for these incidents and are part of a regional and national network that make response to these fires possible. But this fire pushed our preparation and resources to the limit. The state's largest ever wildfire, coupled with the challenges brought on by the COVID-19 pandemic, meant all hands on deck from areas as close as Redstone Canyon to 50 miles across the Continental Divide. From the very beginning, we had our eye on two important goals: full suppression and keeping the public safe. We only succeeded because of the extraordinary collaboration of compassionate, professional, and well-trained individuals, teams, and volunteers. We salute our firefighters, our law enforcement, as well as the many nonprofits, volunteers, and Northern Colorado communities who offered endless support and positivity. And yes, some help from Mother Nature, which greatly assisted our crews in establishing a 100% containment status on December 2nd to this 4-month-long historic fire. As you can see, although we've had wildfires in the past, this disaster was beyond what we had ever seen before. 2020 was a significant year, and it has a special significance for me. I announced my retirement in 2020. Soon I'll be hanging my helmet back up on the rack and entering private life after 44 years in emergency services, 33 of which were right here at PFA. I'm very proud of the men and women of this organization and how they stand up for you each day to provide prompt, skillful, and caring service through courage, leadership, and duty, so that we have a great place to live in this great community. So for now, it's so long. We'll see you out there, and be safe.
Well, I know that you'd agree with the mayor and me, and that we cannot express our gratitude and appreciation enough for our first responders for this past year. Wow, what an amazing group of individuals, and we're just very grateful to all of you who are watching, and the first responders. Thank you for what you've done this past year, and thank you for what you're doing as we look to 2021. You may recall that several State of the City addresses several years ago, we announced that we were going to create a new approach to emergency preparedness and security at the city. Well, we did fulfill that promise, and just in time. So what an ideal move that was about 2 years ago, a year and a half ago, to get that new structure in place. And I want to acknowledge Jim Byrne and the director of this part of our organization, and so many others for your efforts and the work that you're doing. Jim, you've stepped up in this role, and I know I speak on behalf of the entire community and organization, say thank you for your leadership. You know, there were so many staff that were involved in the fire at so many levels from so many different locations. I got to tour with Chief DeMint and some others in the middle of the fire event, and just to see all the different uniforms that people had on, representing so many different places from Northern Colorado and throughout the state, and then of course throughout the country. And it was just really, really very impressive. So something that you may not know, and Chief Dement talked about it just briefly, but there is a really, really important correlation between fires and drinking water. And so because we don't have all the time to go through the details, I just want you to know that your city for decades has taken meticulous care and has monitored the quality of our water coming up from all the way the point source down into our community. And if you're like me, when you're traveling outside of COVID and you come back to town and you turn on your faucet and drink the Fort Collins water, you know what I'm talking about. That doesn't just sort of happen. It takes a lot of work, and that watershed matters a lot. So as the full impacts of the fire become more apparent, it's likely that the Poudre River will start to experience impaired water quality, and particularly during the spring and snowmelt and summer thunderstorms in the watershed. So just be aware of that. We've got very professional, very competent, dedicated local teams and also regional partners and national partners who are helping us do this. So before I turn it back to the mayor, I want to just go back to the video just for a second. Chief Dement, he mentioned that after 33 years of working at the Poudre Fire Authority and serving Fort Collins community, he's going to be, I think he said, hanging up his boots. Hey, Chief, I just want to say publicly, you're a consummate professional, a great communicator, and a dear friend to this city. And we are very grateful for your services. And you've been an amazing leader. And as a Poudre Fire Authority board member, we will miss you, and know that this community and this city manager is very grateful for you and the contributions that you've made.
Yeah, and Chief, on behalf of the council, I'd also like to add my thanks and congratulations to you. We're so thankful for the many teams who worked on this fire and to help save our city's assets and our water infrastructure in our natural areas, including the Michigan Ditch, the Joe Wright Reservoir, the Colorado Big Thompson Water Diversion Project, and Bobcat Ridge Natural Area. We literally saw some very dark days. It seemed like nighttime at noontime when we had very bad air quality and we had ash falling from the sky. Our city educated and communicated with the community with regards to air quality and health impacts during that 4-month period of the wildfires. The city continuously monitored air quality and provided alerts to our community for those that had to take special concern. A reminder of climate change. In 2020, the fires underscore the trends in the climate awareness, and locally, we have ongoing drought and increased temperatures. Our climate future plan was updated to provide 3 plans into one as to what we can do here locally to address this in Fort Collins. Our council continues to look for opportunities to improve our environmental impacts, such as waste in our community, through innovative approaches.
So I don't know about you, but when I saw that video for the first time, the fire video, what an ominous situation that we had, and dark and gloomy, and 2020 was truly an amazing year that many of us don't want to, none of us want to relive. But so as I begin to wrap up my comments, there's some things that I want to share. Fort Collins is very good at process and engagement and 24/7, 365 services. We have robust systems that we rely on that I spoke to earlier, our budgeting for outcomes process, our strategic planning process, our council goal setting processes, our community-wide surveys that really give us a good feel for on an annual basis, sometimes on a biannual or every other year basis. Our mayor and city council members are actively engaged in the community. All that is what helps build this community that we all love and all enjoy. But I do want to say I haven't shared a lot today of what data to support our case here. And if you're a follower of State of the City addresses, you know that we like to share data. So I'm going to share a couple of facts so that we stay stay consistent with that. So here goes. Let me start with 911 calls in 2020. We had 70,985 calls. The average response time was under 5 minutes for all priority calls. Our connection broadband utility, which we haven't talked a whole lot about tonight, except for in the digital equity space, it is continuing to move forward in its construction, and our customers are signing up like crazy, and in a predictable, reliable way, to be more professional about it. My wife and I connected to connection broadband about a week and a half ago. I've never, ever seen more robust service at a great price, great customer service, and reliable. But connection broadband they pulled over 2.1 million feet of fiber optics to many of our streets and homes and so forth. That's about 400 miles of fiber. We still have a lot of work to do. City staff responded to over 6,000 service area requests via Access Fort Collins, and the average response time for those 6,000 requests was under 2 days. More than 84,000 rounds of golf were played in our 3 municipal golf courses. 94%, we had a 94% increase in our natural area visits through the spring. We filled 3,481 potholes. We abated 1,616 graffiti tags. On average, we were able to abate within 1.5 days. We swept 15,000 miles of streets and bike lanes. We plowed 71,000 miles of streets and trails. We crushed or recycled 48,000 tons of asphalt and 21,000 tons of concrete. That's material that was directly 100% diverted away from the landfill. That's a big deal. We completed over 77 miles of street maintenance. So if anyone is doubting our commitment to performance excellence and continuous improvement, I hope that helps. I will tell you the deep commitment that we have to operational excellence and continuous improvement gives me great optimism as we move forward into 2021. So it will be a year of challenges. We have an April municipal election, a new council, and a new mayor. That's significant. We also have significant change occurring at our city executive leadership team. One important highlight in that space is the onboarding of our new deputy city manager, Kyle Stannard, has come to us from the city of Bellevue, Washington, and I'm delighted to have him on board, and I think he's going to have a significant impact on the city organization. I have great confidence and enthusiasm, as I mentioned earlier, coming into 2021 because of those robust systems. We have a well-run, high-performing city that has served us well in the past. It's really important to also mention what we've inherited. We inherited, so many of us, past mayors and council members and city managers and police chiefs and grounds workers and IT people. We've inherited amazing place from our predecessors, and we've wanted to only add to that. But I want to recognize that tens of thousands of people who've helped contribute in the past to make this place the great place that it is. And without each and every one of my 2,400 colleagues, those little points, those stats that I just mentioned earlier, who delivered these services day in and day out, Fort Collins would not be the place that it is. We've also been given, and I've been the city manager for quite a while in Fort Collins, and I need to say this has been consistent. We've also been given permission to remain curious, to think big, and to fail, which inevitably leads to improvement. And I have so much appreciation for the existing council members that I get to work with, and this mayor. Fort Collins, I've said this before, you elect really good people to be your representatives. And I'm thankful for that. That makes my job a true privilege to do on a daily, hourly, yearly kind of basis. If you ask any chief executive to rate the importance of their relationship with their board of directors and their board chair, every single one of them will tell you that it's critical. So again, Fort Collins, thanks for giving us the leadership, the elected leadership that you have. And okay, so, it's also important that the mayor, this is his final State of the City address that we'll be able to do together. Mayor, you've had a profound impact on this city, on me personally, and in my professional journey, my leadership journey. Not only has Wade Troxell been the mayor for the last 6 years, but he also spent 8 years on city council. And what I love is your love for this city, Mayor. So with that, I'll turn it over to you for your final comments.
Darin, it's been a great pleasure to work with you and also our city attorney, Carrie Daggett. And I should point out that the city saw retirement longstanding Chief Judge Kathleen Lane. Judge Lane served our community for 31 years, with council reappointing her 16 times. Prior to being a municipal judge, she was an assistant city attorney for 6 years. Thank you, Kathleen, for your faithful service and your leadership for our community. And our community hired a new chief judge in a competitive process. And we're excited to have Chief Judge Jill Huser providing that leadership in that important role in our community. So welcome, Jill. And we saw a number of losses and retirements within our community. One notable loss in our community is former Mayor John Knesevich passed away. And a notable retirement was our first female city attorney, and our local land use attorney, Lucia Liley, retired. And so inevitably in the ebb and flow, we lose great leaders over time, but we should pause and really thank them for their great service over time. To wrap this up, and one of the important things is, and we have a great community because we work together. Reflecting upon this past year, there were at least five crises had to deal with. And I don't know how many people know this, but as the mayor, I chair the city's disaster committee. And boy, what a year it was. So with COVID and with economic issues and social justice and fires and mental health issues, opioid crisis and so forth. So it's one of those things that really helps put into perspective the kind of community that we have, not only that there are crises, but it's really the response and rising to the challenge. And Fort Collins came together. We're still thriving in the midst of a lot of change and the challenges that are with us. And I just want to provide a few thanks and final remarks in my final State of the City address and serving 14 years on City Council. First, I want to thank my family, my wife, Jean, Graham, and Ellie. When it's time for an election, I went through 5 elections, we would get together as a family. And Jean would ask really the 5 whys, looking to me for the honest, authentic reason for why, I was running, and really if I was aligned with and having a community motivation. And I thank her for that. And I would ask each in the family if I should go forward. And each of the 2 kids and my wife had a vote veto. So I just want to thank my family for their support during these 14 years to serve as your mayor and on City Council. This is my 6th State of the City address, serving 3 terms as your mayor and 14 years on council, as I mentioned, being first elected in April 2007. It's truly been a great honor for me to serve my hometown as your mayor and on City Council. When I was born at Poudre Valley Hospital, there were about 20,000 people in Fort Collins. Now we were about 175,000 people. This community isn't defined by some number, but it's really captured as a wonderful community of friendly, supportive individuals building a better community for the future. Fort Collins is a great community, not defined by the awards or the best of recognitions, but by the wonderful people caring for each other and in aggregate for the love of Fort Collins. A great city does not just happen to be. We have great leadership, Darin and your staff, and throughout the entire organization. That just doesn't happen. That's really intentional. Growing up here, I witnessed great leadership in a growing aspirational agricultural town, transforming into a lovely mid-sized city that is welcoming for all. We are best when we look to the future and think aspirationally together, and then following up on that with pragmatic, get it done planning and execution. This is a legacy that has formed the foundation that we have today. A barrier to our future is really one of just average thinking. We need to think aspirationally and go for a better community. We need to be bold to achieve the future that we want for Fort Collins. We need to come together as Northern Colorado region. Small thinking, being incremental, us versus them will not do it. We need to lift our heads up. We need to look to the horizon and intentionally chart the path to our future state and correct as necessary. Let's be purposeful about Fort Collins and Northern Colorado. As a city and as a region, let's transform our mobility systems to have a more distinct neighborhood and people orientation. In the spirit of climate economy, let's innovate for a more holistic circular economy and scalable solutions that can not only impact our community, but be market solutions around the world. Let's enable affordable housing across every demographic for all in our community. Let's make Fort Collins an innovation model of co-creation for the future of the American economy. Let's actively encourage and enable local food production systems and access to nature throughout our community. And let's partner and collaborate to increase the awareness of our connected system and our system of systems for the next generation. You know, through a health pandemic, through our economic impacts, through our social unrest and the falling ash from the fires, you know, we have still been recognized in 2020 by livability.com as the most livable city in the United States. We've been recognized by MarketWatch as the best place to live in 2020. And recently, we're a top 10 remote ready city in the United States. You know, that's not bad for a tough year. So in conclusion, the state of the city is strong and resilient. We're strong and resilient in light of the challenges that we are facing in the COVID recovery phase. We have great promise for the future. And let's proceed boldly and realize this promise together. Thank you, Darin, and thank you, Council, and thank you all. And a good night, Fort Collins.